Playing with Trains. Written and read by TARDIS 9. Based on the Railway series created by the Reverend Wilbert Awdry and Thomas and Friends by Britt Allcroft and David Mitten. Every wise engine knows the importance of crew members. They are responsible for the operation and maintenance of the engine. If an engine breaks down, it is the crew's responsibility to send for help and to solve the problem in any way they can. If a train is damaged or delayed as a result of poor driving, firing or guarding, the crew are usually directly responsible. Before they can be employed as fully qualified drivers, firemen or guards, these prospective crew members must be trained in their work and be able to perform their task well. The Skarloey engines knew this well. All except Ivor Hugh. He would often grumble and complain about the times he was used for training sessions. "It's disgraceful," he complained one night in the sheds. "Why on earth should these drivers choose me to do their training on? All I do is just run into buffers or go back and forth so many times I get dizzy." Skarloey groaned. He had, over the years, seen a similar attitude to this. "You mind what you say, Ivor Hugh," he warned. "Otherwise it will come back to haunt you." Rheneas agreed. "You must always give your crews plenty of patience. These trainees are still learning after all." "What's going on now?" demanded Sir Handel as he backed down into his berth. It had been a bad day for him. First his fire wouldn't start, then his train was delayed by a last-minute passenger, and finally he had been held up by a broken signal, which meant that he was late meeting Gordon at Crovan's Gate. "Oh, just Ivor Hugh complaining about being used for new drivers," replied Peter Sam. He had had enough of hearing Ivor Hugh's complaints and was glad he was due out for a goods run in a few minutes. "Preposterous! All engines should know that the more experienced a crew is, the better," sniffed Sir Handel. "A well-trained crew is a useful crew." "That isn't what you said back in the day, young engine," came a voice. Sir Handel looked to find Duke standing on shed. "I seem to remember," Duke carried on, "something about crews in training being men playing trains?" Sir Handel looked furious, then smiled ruefully. "I did, didn't I? Go on, Grandpa. Tell them how bad I was." And this was the story Duke told. It happened a long time ago, back in the days of the Mid-Sodor Railway. Back then, Peter Sam was called Stuart and Sir Handel Falcon. One morning, just as the engines were getting steamed up, the manager came to see them. "Some of our firemen have been here for some years now," he explained. "They have applied for promotion to drivers, but they must be trained first. So I advise you all to please be as patient and cooperative as you can with them." But Falcon was unwilling. "Ridiculous," he grumbled in his shed that night. "Why should an important engine like me be made into somebody's personal training device? It's demeaning, I tell you." "But it has to be done, Falcon," protested Inny sternly. She was a large green tank engine with 2 wheels in front, 6 driving wheels and 2 trailing wheels at the back. "They only let them drive us when they are fully qualified to do so." "Quite right," agreed Duke. "It would be too dangerous for an untrained crew to be left in charge of an engine. If they did that, it would only lead to disaster. That would never suit his grace." "Only lead to disaster," sneered Falcon. "You make it all sound like something far too dangerous for anyone to do, especially you, Grandpuff. It's all just men playing with trains, that's what it is. I'm a responsible engine, and I can look out for myself, thank you very much." So you're responsible enough to come off the rails on the mountain road? Asked Stuart innocently. The other engines descended into giggle fits, while Falcon just sat and seethed furiously. The next day, Inny was heading up the line light engine to the mines, where two small cabless engines named Atlas and Alfred worked. Her regular crew were on board her that day, but their roles were reversed. Her new fireman was training to be a driver, and so he was driving her that day. Her regular driver was also on board her, taking on firing duties while supervising the trainee driver. She told them about what Falcon had said. "I don't like it," she said. "He calls you men playing trains." Her trainee driver frowned. "Don't listen to him," he replied. "He's just too full of hot air, that's his trouble. Engines like him get their comeuppance one way or another. Remember what Duke said about number 2? Agreed Inny. She knew all too well about a certain pumping engine and his fall from grace. Then she felt a jolt as she picked up more speed. "Oh!" she exclaimed. "Careful!" "Sorry," the trainee driver said. "I've never really done this before." "Well, you'll get the hang of it soon," she said encouragingly. "You just need practice." The railway was struggling. A new power station had opened up. The Mid-Sodor Railway was not large enough to service it, so the fat director had built a new branch line for the Northwestern Railway to service it. Everyone worked hard to prevent the inevitable closure, but the disastrous outcome was plain for all to see. As passenger traffic dwindled, so did goods traffic. At one of the mines, a coal mine near Casnehowen, the effort to keep in business was so great, so strenuous in fact, that their current supply was nearly exhausted, down only to an exceptionally poor load Atlas had brought up that morning. Inny arrived at the coal mine, ready for work. "Alfred's just bringing up the last load now," Atlas told her. "It should be another few minutes." "Oh, well," sighed Inny. "At least I now have a few minutes to fill up on coal. Mind if I use the bunker here?" "Be my guest," he said. "But mind how you go. It's worse than usual today." As Inny trundled into the siding and refilled her bunker, Alfred arrived with the last of the coal trucks. "The sooner we blast that hillside, the better," he complained. "This coal's terrible." "Well, we'll soon see about that," Atlas agreed. "The foreman reckons there's more coal to be had in that cliff over there," he explained to Inny, gesturing towards an untouched cliff face. "Here's hoping he's right." "Well, if he is," Inny grinned, "it'll be one in the eye for that old power station." "Indeed," Atlas grinned. "What's that old Grandpuff always says?" "You mean Duke," corrected Inny. "Fancy calling him Grandpuff. That would never suit his grace," she said, imitating his voice. The two engines erupted into fits of laughter. Soon Inny was ready to go. Her train was assembled and her bunker full of coal. The trucks were poorly maintained, so Inny knew to handle them with extra care. She whistled goodbye to the two cabless engines and set off down to the port at Arlesborough. Clinker is the result of what happens when some minerals found in coal mix with sulfur and oxygen at high temperatures. Too much sulfur, iron and clay in the coal is a common cause to this problem. When clinker forms, it blocks an engine's airways, making it difficult for them to steam properly. Inny's crew should have noticed this, but they were so busy loading her up and taking the train down to the port that they didn't. When Inny was approaching Arlesdale, her trainee driver opened the regulator hard. "Watch out!" she cried as she shot forward. "Sorry," the trainee driver called, "but we must keep time, you know." "Yes!" coughed Inny, the clinker now getting into her pipes as a result of her burst of speed. But, watch it, will you?" It was a rough journey for Inny. All along the line she coughed coughed and spluttered as though she had come down with an infectious disease. Great unhealthily grey clouds of smoke billowed from her funnel. Finally, just as they passed Farquhar Road, it happened. 1 minute, she was moving slowly but surely. The next, she disappeared in a cloud of steam, before suddenly reappearing again. Her fire was still burning, but she had no more water left. Help! Help me! She coughed. They damped down her fire and telephoned the yard. Stuart and Falcon were in the yard being steamed up when the call came through. Inny has broken down, the manager told them. She's stranded just beyond Farquhar Road. We must hurry. Her train is due at the docks any minute. The two engines hurried down the line. They soon found Inny stranded outside the station and looking very flustered. Whatever's the problem, Inny? Stuart asked. My fire, Inny wheezed. It's clinkered and I haven't any water left. Stuart looked on in sympathy, but Falcon just burst out laughing. Clinker, eh? He grinned. So drivers should be trained on engines like us, should they? I've never had a problem with my driver, and he's a trained professional. Shut up, snapped his driver. It's not funny. Inny's pipes are clogged. Stuart, could you take Inny home, please? Falcon, since you think so little of us using you engines for training, you can take the coal to the docks instead. Falcon immediately fell silent at this. Soon, Stuart was coupled up to Inny and he took her back to the sheds to have her pipes cleaned out. Falcon, meanwhile, backed down onto the trucks angrily. Oh, they screamed. We'll show you. They were furious. They liked Inny. She always spoke to them firmly but kindly, willingly took them out, and certainly never bumped them. Falcon, however, was the exact opposite. Needless to say, the trucks couldn't bear to see her be teased by Falcon like that. Besides, they had often been bumped and banged by him and decided to pay him out. They whispered amongst themselves. We'll do it at Alsborough Bridge Street, they chortled. Falcon didn't notice this. He was feeling too smug with his own wit. Trainee drivers, he snorted. What's the use in them? All they do is cause nothing but trouble. And trouble was exactly what he was heading for. Engines have a brake lever known as a vacuum brake. It is used to apply the brakes on a train while in motion. If one of the vacuum brakes on the train fails and a wagon's brakes come on unintentionally, the whole train risks derailment if it does not stop in time. This is especially the case with hot axle boxes. As Falcon puffed through Alsborough Bridge Street, he felt the weight of the trucks against him. "Oh!" he cried. "Hold back on me, would you?" And he pulled forward harder. "Go it, boy!" encouraged the driver, but the fireman was reluctant. He had seen the pressure gauge for the vacuum brakes shoot down to 0. "I can smell burning," he said. He looked back. Sure enough, a trail of sparks slowly emerged from underneath one of the trucks. "Hot box! It's a hot box!" he cried. "Don't be daft," retorted the driver. "It's probably the trucks holding us back." And he opened the regulator further. "No, it's a hot box, I tell you," the fireman argued. Sensing that the driver wouldn't listen to him, he forced him aside and shut off steam. Then he opened the valve for the vacuum brakes fully. Immediately, the brakes came on with a squeal and the whole train stopped. "What the—" the driver gasped. He looked at the valve, then back at the gauge. Then he smiled. "Serves me right for not paying attention," he said. "Well done, Matt. You'll make a fine driver when you pass your tests, you will." Falcon was stunned. But pass your tests?" he exclaimed. "Do you mean to tell me you're a trainee driver?" "Yes, I am," replied the fireman with a grin. "Not so useless now, are we? There's a point behind us playing trains, you know." Falcon said nothing. He looked over to a siding. There stood Jim, wearing a huge grin across his smoke box. Falcon groaned. He had a nasty feeling this wasn't the end of his problems. And he was right. Falcon was uncoupled from the truck with the hot box and took his half of the coal train to the port. Then he waited on a siding as Jim, chuckling to himself, shunted the truck onto the other line and pushed the rest of the train to the port. Quietly, Falcon fetched an empty truck, returned to the siding, and filled it up with coal from the other truck. This made the ship very late indeed. The manager was cross at this, but not unsympathetic to the fact that it wasn't Falcon's fault. But I have heard about your attitudes towards firemen using you for training to become drivers, he went on. Perhaps a week of shunting work will straighten you out. Falcon gulped. Yes, sir, he complied. Falcon crawled slowly back to the sheds. He had hoped it would be empty. Unfortunately, Duke, Stuart, Inny, and Jim were all there. Inny looked much better. Her pipes were clean and she was talking happily to the other engines. No one seemed to notice when Falcon came in. They were all too busy talking about playing with trains and other games people play. They laughed a lot about it. Falcon decided that they were younger, more immature engines. But from that day onwards, Falcon, or rather Sir Handel, was always more respectful about being used for training purposes, Duke grinned. Sir Handel looked at Ivor Hugh. That proved exactly what I said, you know, he said smugly. A well-trained crew is a useful crew. Just one thing, though, asked Ivor Hugh. What happened to Inny? She sounds like a nice sort of engine. I'd really like to meet her. Who knows? Duke replied. Last I heard she was sold to the Vicarstown Rail Museum. The documents for this were destroyed during the war, though. But, all the same, she did well to earn her preservation. I'll tell you about it another time. All I can say now is that, wherever she is, I hope she's still able to help those who are interested in playing with trains. Everyone laughed except for Sir Handel and Ivor Hugh. Sir Handel simply blushed and grinned. Ivor Hugh, realizing how silly he had been, simply yawned and went to sleep, a new meaning of the importance of training deep within his smoke box.